to that point there, do you think we should automatically trust people, or is there a sense of naivety to that?
I think it comes down to your...
And boom, we are live. What's up, everybody? Couple Casuals Podcast, episode number 45. I am your host, Stefano. And guys, I got another very special conversation for you guys today. These conversations are always very special to me because the guest is very special to me. My guest today is my person, my love, my life partner, and as of most recently, my fiancé. So for the fourth time, guys, I want to welcome back to the conversation, Rebecca Nobrega.
Wow. Hello. Thank you so much for having me again. I
Four
always
times.
get so nervous. 4 times.
Yes.
Always get so nervous.
But
and
nerves
so
are
happy.
good. It helps us stay dialed.
Yes.
And that's a part of it, babes. You know what I mean? Like, we're in this together, and we gotta do things that make us nervous because that's how we grow.
Yes.
And I think that's probably a good starter for this conversation. And then also where we have to start is the previous conversation that we had. Well, it was supposed to be a conversation, but it ended up to be obviously a surprise, which many people know now. It was the infamous proposal podcast. So for the people that don't know, I laid out an elusive plan and a ploy put together to propose to you live on the podcast. So there it is right there. And it was exciting. It was fun. And it turned out exactly as I wanted. So I was very happy from that. So maybe just touch on your perspective quickly. What was that like for you?
Oh my gosh. I was so nervous. When something was different in your energy that day.
But you didn't know though.
No, I didn't know. But like, obviously it was different, but it was like a good different. I'm like, he's wearing a button up to his podcast.
I knew the fucking button up was going to throw it off, but I don't know if you remember, but I said to you, I'm going to dress up a little bit today because I know you. So I knew that you were going to be like, oh, why is he wearing a button up? So I purposely said to you, which maybe you didn't hear me, but I said to you, I'm going to wear a button up today because you know what? I feel like I'm too casual on Couple Casuals podcast. So maybe I'm going to wear a button up today. So I tried to probe it a bit, but I guess it didn't work.
No, it did. I still didn't know, but it was, so I'm like, so when we got here and everything, I'm like, okay. And then you pulled out the piece of paper, and that's when I'm like, oh my gosh, could this be happening? Mm-hmm. And my heart started pounding. And then I just completely went into a shell because I'm like, oh my gosh. And it was the most beautiful surprise ever.
Yes, I thought it was beautiful too. And I'm really grateful that it happened the way it did. And it made sense.
It was such a great idea. You honestly did it was so thoughtful, it was so intentional and so meaningful for our relationship. So you did an amazing job.
Thank you, babes. I appreciate that because, even from a guy's perspective, we try to make that moment special. So I know a lot of guys out there listening and watching can agree if they've done it or if they're thinking of doing it. You want to try to find a way to make it special and that it makes sense to your guy's story. And I thought that was applicable in that situation, meeting on the podcast, obviously, and stuff like that. It made a full circle moment at that particular time. So it was beautiful. But for the guys that are watching and listening, trying to think of a plan, I think it was from Jay Shetty's book that we read that I really took that seriously at the beginning. He's talking about a proposal that he had for his wife, and he made this over extravagant scenario that a lot of the things she didn't value. So it's just understanding what you would value, what we value, and the experience is the most important thing. So that was beautiful. But one of the other things that I had to do in preparation to making this elusive plan that I was showing you that we're going to have a conversation, like this is a podcast. So for the people listening, one of the things I do is I somewhat prepare a trajectory of a conversation, especially when I'm having Rebecca on, right? So we can run through some ideas of things that we want to talk about. So I actually prepared a conversation in preparation to that day, and the content of the conversation was applicable to what we were going to be doing, which was proposing, getting married. So I created a conversation about commitment and longevity and the aspect of how to maintain or work your way towards a successful long-term relationship. So the maintenance aspect of love. So I actually prepared a conversation for that. So what we're going to do today is we're going to actually have that conversation that we were allegedly supposed to have last time. So I've kind of put an extension on it, and I put a good bit of effort into it. So I think there's going to be some interesting things there. But one of the things that I started with last time was I asked you a question. I proposed you a question that would sort of set the stage for that moment that I was leading up to. I asked you about unconditional love. Mm-hmm. And your answer was very, very well done. And what I want to do today is I want to extend that question now. So I asked you last time, what does unconditional love mean to you? Today, what I want to do is I sort of want to set the stage with asking you, is unconditional love required in a successful long-term relationship? We'll sort of start there.
I think it kind of starts with what unconditional love means to you and how you define it. I think it's not as simple as saying, oh, unconditional love, because it's like an umbrella of so many different things. At least that's the way my brain works. I think that love plays a huge role in long-term commitment and the maintenance. I think it's more than just unconditional love, because after a certain amount of time, love is not enough. Love is essential. It is the foundation, but love is a choice, because we grow as individuals. We undergo all these different experiences, and there's so many different things that we have to work through and so on. So I think it's unconditional love in combination with unconditional acceptance. I think that's part of it. I think it goes hand in hand, and an unconditional or unwavering rather commitment. So I think those things are kind of all, encompassing for unconditional love, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because it's interesting, because you would think like, okay, in order to be with somebody for life, there needs to be some sort of unconditional element to it, in a way where, there's going to be times where you're not at your best, I'm not at my best. And if there's conditions like, oh, well, if you're not making a certain amount of money, or if you're not doing this, then I'm out. Like, I can't do this. That seems like that could be the opposite of what unconditional love is.
So then is it unconditional love? Is unconditional love real in that there are no conditions attached? You can love a child unconditionally. Your pet can love you unconditionally. Your child can love a parent unconditionally.
Yeah.
But when it comes to partners, I'm not actually sure that unconditional love exists, because it is broken down into so many things. Maybe it's unconditional commitment or unconditional choice to love.
Well, there's conditions to everything. Well, you look at, like, an easy example is like if there's physical, mental, emotional abuse in the relationship. Like, that doesn't mean like, oh, you should just, because you're with that person, you should just unconditionally accept them and just go along with that. There's certain conditions, obviously, to it. But I think on a personal level and like just an intimate, spiritual, connective understanding of that person and making a choice, like you said, to them, there is a certain level of commitment and unconditional commitment to that. So it sort of is a precursor to having a long-term successful relationship, because you need to be willing to commit in a level where it might be up and down. And I think we live in a time today where maybe everybody doesn't really understand that fully, because the divorce rate's high and people aren't staying together as much as maybe they should. The durability aspect is not as prevalent as it once was, but we'll get into those things today. But that's a perfect way to sort of start the conversation, because what I want to do now is get into like the meat and potatoes of the conversation. I want to talk about what I feel is 4 pillars of a successful long-term relationship. First one being trust. Like in any relationship, you need to have trust in an intimate relationship, and then any sort of friendship or any relationship that you have. The second is staying in love and maintaining love, and never stop dating your partner. I think we're going to get into some interesting things there. The third one is avoiding comfortability, individually and collectively. We live in a society today where like it's very easy to get comfortable and complacent. So we'll talk about that. And then the fourth one, very interesting one, is transcending your relationship. Transcending it through experience and through like maybe spiritual experiences, like your relationship with God and whatever that looks like for you two. So I think we're going to get into some good stuff there. There's a lot of content for there. So I want to kind of jump into it, starting with trust. The most important thing in any relationship. It is the precursor, I believe, to love. In order to love somebody, you have to trust them. So there's interesting things there. Like, do you automatically trust them? Like, how does that work? So we'll kind of get into it. But I'm going to start with the masculine perspective, because I can speak from my perspective, from personal experience, that if a man is well put together, he understands his individuality, he believes in who he is, his integrity is intact, and he's really ready to put forth good things in this world, including in his intimate relationship. If he feels trust and respect from his woman, you're going to get the best out of that man like you wouldn't believe. He's going to be able to open his heart for you like you never seen before. You're going to be able to get the true, authentic side of that man. And even from personal experience and then relating to our relationship now, the fact that I've never had a lapse of trust in you and that you do demonstrate a lot of respect for me as well as I do to you, that's allowed me to really learn about myself more in the relationship. And it's really helped me open my heart because, like I said to you, when we started a relationship, one of the things I had trouble with was allowing somebody in because I had issues with trust. So you were that key to unlock that for me, to help me believe in trusting another person, because you're put in a vulnerable state. And I've always been a protective kind of myself and people around me, and wanting to make sure that, I'm very, it's very fragile and you want to be careful. So trust is fragile. Trust is a beautiful thing, but it is the foundation, especially for a man. That's how we really feel love, through trust and respect. So now I'll pass it over to you from a feminine perspective. What are some things that you think you guys feel or you experience when you feel an unbounded trust from your partner? Is it similar or does it look different? Is there an element of safety? What does that look like for you?
I think it's definitely similar, but also safety is, definitely a huge component. I feel like, you have the standard, or not the standard, but the qualities of what makes a masculine man, right? So there is the love, there's the safety element, there is the leadership sort of element there. So I feel like that is kind of the foundation for trust, but it goes much deeper than that. So for instance, integrity, your character, who that is. When you meet somebody, you're getting to know somebody. Not that energy doesn't lie, but energy doesn't lie either. You get to know somebody, you get to see how they are, who their character is, and integrity. So I think something we look for is, does he do what he says he's going to do, right? And that is very much a masculine trait. It's integrity. So I think that trust, at least, for me, but also I feel like maybe some people will resonate too, is trust is built on that. Are you following through with what you say you're going to do? Mm-hmm. And then in conjunction or in combination with that, you're also exercising that masculine quality, which is very important and something we look for, right? Mm-hmm. So in the early stages of getting to know you, I began to grow deeper trust in you because you never gave me a reason not to trust you. Now forget just, loyalty and all that kind of stuff. It comes down to your word, your integrity. So you first showed me trust through your integrity. And now especially, right? Like women feel love through words a lot of the time as well. Now, and men kind of know that too. So this is kind of separate, but a man could, as some people would say, they could be sweet talkers or they know how to be smooth, but it's up to us to have that discernment. Is it consistent, right? Like, how is this character? So that was kind of very long-winded and all over the place. But I think that integrity is a huge role in building the foundation of trust from a female perspective, at least for me. No, that might not be true for everyone.
No, 100%. It's an interesting answer. I didn't think about it like that too, because you think about trust and you think about, oh, do you trust them? And automatically your brain goes to, are they going to betray you or something like that? And like that's one.
Before it even gets to that point, though, it's like when you meet anybody, forget somebody who maybe you're trying to pursue a relationship with, any person in business, anyone you meet on the street, anybody like that, it's what kind of person are they? Before you even get to betrayal and all that, you have to set a foundation. Think of friendship. So it comes down to integrity. And that's kind of the same for, I think, both roles. Even in friends, you want to know that your friendships, does this person do what they say they're going to do? Are they consistent? How do they show up? And then from there, you can start unpacking. But if you can't even trust, let's say, and I'm from a female's perspective, if you can't trust a man is going to do what he says he's going to do, then everything that happens after doesn't matter because you already know what you need to know. You can't trust him to do that. You can't trust him to lead. You don't trust in his leadership. Forget an intimate relationship because trust is already, you're already unsure about that.
Yeah. So basically, in summary, it's the content of his character that the woman's evaluating. And it's a beautiful thing because that is sort of the foundation. Because if you notice, which we'll get into now, if the man is lying or any person in general is lying, and you pick up on those things, it can really make your lapse of judgment in their trust. So it's very fragile. It's a very fragile thing, trust, and that's something I want to sort of talk about now is lying. People misinterpret the severity of lying on an individual aspect, even moving away from the masculine and feminine dynamic, because this is more of a general perspective because lying is detrimental for both sexes, right? But especially for a man, I think there's a level of, like you were saying, integrity and keeping your word. For the men listening out there, if you say you're going to do something, of course, instances come up and things may happen where you may not be able to keep your word in that instant. But overall, generally speaking, if you're a man of your word, you'll garner a lot of respect from your woman. And I think that's what you were alluding to. But
that's right.
Lying is a detrimental act that we enroll ourselves in, that not only makes you lose perspective of who you are, you lose conscious. I've seen it many times. I know people that lie a lot or have lied a lot, and maybe they've improved since then, or maybe they're people that still do that. But I've seen certain instances where they change over time and they lose track of who they are. Their morals are out of tack. Their values are out of tack. Nothing really has consequence because lying gets them out of it, and that also they believe them to be true. So it distorts their perception of life, and lying can be extremely detrimental. So those things add to the lapse of trust between you and the partner, because trust is so fragile, but it can be destroyed one small step at a time. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. It's the little things that make up the big things.
Exactly. So sometimes we think, oh, it's just a little white lie, or you imagine from a relationship, right? If I catch you lying about one little small thing, you might be, oh yeah, but like I said this, that, and the third. But you still lied about it. That can now compound to the next thing, can compound to the next thing. And then I'm going to remember that you lied about that one thing, that I'm going to maybe think, now I'm questioning your integrity, wondering if you're lying about this, wondering if you're lying about that. So what I'm trying to say is that trust is so fragile that there's not just one big event that happens that you can lose trust for somebody. That can happen too. Betrayal, cheating, stuff like that. But there's also the small things that happen in a relationship that compound together that make you lose trust for that partner slowly but surely. So touch on, from your opinion, like the importance of trust and like sort of how we can maintain it, and how do we make sure that between me and you, or just in general relationship, we can make sure that we maintain our trust and that it's taken very, very seriously.
That's a loaded question. I think, just to quickly touch on what you said about like infidelity, for instance, it's the little things that end up getting you to that point, right? So it's that lack of maintenance, it's that lack of love, it's that lack of, masculinity, femininity, us feeling love in the ways that we receive love. So everything starts, but before that, it starts with you. Like, for instance, if we're talking on, let's say you're with, my philosophy is you trust somebody until they give you a reason not to trust them.
Okay.
Always, in the sense of course you could be weary or not weary, but maybe the first day you meet them, you're not going to go tell them your darkest secret. But if someone has not given you a reason not to trust them, then there's no reason to trust them. Then you have to ask yourself, if you're feeling like you're having some concerns with trust, is that a projection from maybe a previous experience? Or you need to tune into yourself and see what kind of insecurity or how secure you feel with trust within yourself. When you grew up, did you grow up around people who maybe, were not trustworthy? And now you're projecting that. So there's so many different layers to, I think, trust. So there's security in self. Everything starts with you. So if you have a strong sense of self, your discernment is that much, wow. If you have
I hear what you just get started, but who cares?
Because I have so many thoughts running through my brain and my mouth cannot articulate them quick enough. If you have a strong sense of self, your discernment in trust and in character is that much stronger, and in trusting your own gut. So with trust and maintaining, there's love, there's that respect. If you as a man feel respected, me as a woman, I feel loved, and vice versa, majority of the time, we're probably not going to have any issues with trust. But if somewhere along the way, I'm not feeling loved, you're not feeling respected, things can slowly dissipate. For instance, there are some people even that check each other's phones. We had this conversation yesterday. If you feel like you need to go through your partner's phone, if you feel like you need to, you don't trust them. And if they have not given you a reason, then that's something you have to work on within yourself. If they have given you a reason not to trust them, that's a little bit more complex. But that's now something that you guys need to unpack as a couple and ask yourself, can I move past this? Can I regain trust in this person? And what does that look like? Trust can be built, but once it's broken, it's very hard to regain.
So you pretty much just answered all the next couple questions I had. Just,
We can unpack further, sorry.
I'm joking. Okay, yeah, to touch on two things that I had there, then I'll kind of plug into the next thing. But I agree with you. I think a lot of the time we can carry our previous experience, whether it's an intimate experience or just in general, we can carry it into our relationship. So we project that onto our partner, right? We may have had lapse of trust or an experience in our previous relationship that you now may bring into the next one. If that's the instance, then I think it's to allude to your point too about individuality, and it starts with you, right? If you're bringing what you've had in the previous relationship, especially in regards to trust, to the next one, that means there in between time, maybe there wasn't enough time for you to do that work on yourself, to be able to come to terms with that and understand that that experience was isolated to that experience. You cannot take it into the next experience, because then you may be destroying something that's good. If I would have brought my previous experiences into our relationship, I could have potentially destroyed something that's very good. So because I did that individual work and I came to terms with a lot of things in my life and I allowed myself to blossom in the way that I did as an individual, I was in turn able to be better for you. So, and our relationship. So you also mentioned checking the other person's phone. That can be linked to what we were just saying. So let's talk about that now. We're in a society today where I feel that I didn't know this, because to come out and say we don't do that with each other. And that's a beautiful thing.
I don't want to, quite frankly. I think that there's a difference between secrecy and privacy. I think that you as an individual deserve, your own privacy, but you've never given me a reason not to trust you. I don't feel like I need to check his phone. I have no reason to think that. And I'm also a believer that the truth always comes out anyways, not in the context of our relationship, but generally speaking, but you've never given me a reason. Mm-hmm. So I have no desire. It's never even crossed my mind.
So to that point there, do you think we should automatically trust people, or is there a sense of naivety to that?
I think it comes down to your judgment of character and your discernment, right? Like, I think we can make mistakes sometimes and we can misjudge and be like, but I feel like in your gut, you always know if you can trust somebody. Mm-hmm. If you're going into a relationship with somebody, right, where your connection is a much deeper level, it's a relationship. If you can't trust them, that's something to address. Can you not trust them from the moment you meet them? That's probably a previous insecurity. Or have little things led you to believe that you can't trust them? Because then they might be red flags that you were choosing to miss in the beginning. Mm-hmm. It's very complex. I don't think it's a one size fits all. Mm-hmm. I think every situation is very unique.
Yep.
Every detail is very unique. And I think that our perception of the situations can also be unique, because we project based on our own experiences. So it's not a one size fits all. Right.
And one of those things is when you maybe take your previous experience into a new one, is this, like we were saying, about checking people's phones. Because in our culture today, I didn't know this, but apparently it's very common for people to check their partner's phone. I didn't know that was a thing. I thought maybe, when you're young, you might do that kind of stuff because you're energized with emotion and all these transitions, and maybe it's your first experience or whatever. But we live in a culture today where that's common practice. It's a very interesting thing, knowing your partner's password and stuff. I may know yours based off just, can you get my phone? Yeah, it's this, that, and the third. But I don't know. I feel like that behavior in itself, like, let me look at your phone, let me look through your phone, that's very weird to me. That seems weird, because that energy that you're putting in, that you're checking that person's phone, even you're trying to appease that little demon in your head that's telling you, you have to check it. You have to check it. Especially if that person gave you no reason to do that. But if they did give you a reason to do that, then you guys are already in some other realm that I feel like it's hard to get out of there. Which, just touch on quickly your thoughts on people checking their partner's phones, and then I'm going to get into the sort of the next thing.
I think if you feel like you have to check it because you can't trust them, that's something that's a further conversation. Mm-hmm. I think, if it's a situation where it's like, my phone's upstairs charging, can I quickly check something on the internet? Like, yeah, sure thing, here's my phone. But that person's intention is to check that. They're not being deceitful and now suddenly scrolling through your text messages. Even if you have nothing to hide, it really comes down to, I think, the intent and why they're looking at that phone. Like, even with me, I would never have any issues, and I don't. I'll be like, Steph, here's can you check this for me? My password's this, just so you can get in it, right? But I trust you to do that. And even if you wanted to scroll through everything, I have nothing to hide. But there's that element of respect for each other and trust. So
And privacy, right?
And
You
privacy.
said that too, and I want to jump into that for 1 second. Is privacy is a big thing too, especially, you need to maintain your own individuality, which this is going to be somewhat of a motif throughout the conversation today. We're individuals first, then we're collectives. So yeah, that's my personal property. I have, guys have group chats with their friends and stuff. So I don't think their girls belong in the group chat. So to the guys out there that are allowing their girls and fiancés or whatever to check their phones, we have group chats and stuff. Can't be letting other people in there. You know what I mean? That's our group chats. But that's to your point about privacy, right? It's a privacy thing and maintaining your own individuality.
Yeah, like there's a big difference with privacy and secrecy, and that's across the board in every relationship, with your friends, with your family, with each other's with your partner. It's privacy and secrecy are two different things, and there will be a lot of people that say, "Oh, well, you should have no reason with your partner just scrolling through everything." Technically, no, you should have no reason. Like when you have nothing to hide, I could say, "Steph, go through my phone, read everything. I have nothing to hide."
But then that person could see things and then misinterpret it. It can draw negative emotions.
It could if you're looking for something, but fundamentally, if you trust somebody, you'd also have no reason to do that. You'd be like, why? Like I have no desire to. I don't need to do that. And if you did, I wouldn't care because I have nothing to hide. So I feel like it really comes down to the trust and what it triggers inside of you. If you really have nothing to hide, you can comb through my phone like nobody's business. But the desire to do so probably won't even really exist because you trust me. So it's complex. So privacy and secrecy are two different things.
I love that.
And you are an individual first. So I know there are people, you can share everything with each other, but I really, really believe that as individuals, we deserve parts of us that stay for us.
And it's beautiful. I love how you make that distinction, though, by the way. I didn't even think about that. I think that's very good for the people listening. Now, one last thing on trust. We spent way more time on trust than I anticipated, but obviously it's a very important. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's very important. Last thing, once the trust is broken, so once trust is broken, can it be regained? Your thoughts, and then I'll give mine.
To keep it kind of short and sweet, I think forgiveness, I think that conquering those kinds of concerns, I think it really comes down to a choice, but it also comes down to being realistic with where you're at. I think it will require a lot of work and consistency from your partner. You might need external help. You might need to do therapy. Your partner might need to exercise certain things consistently for you to rebuild that trust. I think it can be rebuilt, but it is really circumstantial, and it comes down to that person's character.
Okay. All right. Interesting. On the opposite side.
Depends on the. It depends on the situation.
Circumstantial.
There are some people who are faced with infidelity and they're able to overcome it. They are. Now, there are people that say, well, once a cheater, for instance, always one. Is that the case? Maybe majority of the time. I'm not sure. I don't know. But it really depends on the couple. It's very unique, I think.
It's interesting because there's levels of betrayal that can destroy trust, right? Like cheating's the highest one. And then there's like minuscule lies and stuff. But I think they're two of the same in a way, because the small lies can compound, like I was alluding to earlier, that really can get bigger, and it destroys your relationship in a small way, but really big way, because it leads to other things, and you start to that there is the breeding ground. That's where it starts. It's the fuel. Those little lies to your partner and to yourself is how you destroy your relationship. So to me, I think once the trust is legitimately broken, it's over. It's done. You can never ever retain it again. I'm sure there's people listening and watching that would disagree, and that probably are experiencing that now. And I honestly respect and I wish you well. But it comes down to you as an individual. If you value to the max, like integrity, honesty, and just loyalty. If you really value that, and then that person breaks that, a guy like me, I'll overthink and I'll never be able to forget it.
That's why your actions better match your words. They better be in alignment, because if you are in a situation where maybe you're a couple who's working on rebuilding that trust, that person can keep talking and sweet talking you and saying, oh, baby, I'm so sorry. I'm going to do better. But their actions continue to show otherwise. There is no hope. You cannot build trust, but maybe you are an anomaly where that person is working relentlessly and you guys come out stronger than ever. Those stories exist too. For the most part, maybe it's unlikely the trust can be built, but it's not a one size fits all. Everyone is very unique. And we are in no position to necessarily not that we're judging, but we cannot judge. Every situation is different. Maybe most of all, you can't build it, but I do think there are those odd cases where you can.
Well, we're not perfect at the end of the day, so I hope that you're right about that. That's just kind of where I'm sitting right now, and where I've
I
sat
hear
for
you.
a lot of time based on personal experience, and then further to that. But the other thing is maintaining love, right? Like trust is the foundation, and then there's the maintenance of love, the building of love, the longevity of love, and the idea of to never stop dating your partner. And I think that's where we start in this next component, which I'll ask you. I think you're the one who told me that, or I've heard that from you, to never stop dating your partner. So on the forefront, we can understand what that means. Okay, we're always dating our partner. But unpack it a little bit further. What does that statement mean, to never stop dating your partner?
Oh my gosh, it is so key, because when you think about it this way, when you first start dating somebody, you will do anything for them. You'll put your best feet forward, and you will do anything to make sure that they're feeling loved and heard and valued. And then you start to get to know each other more, and then, you start to feel more relaxed. You get more comfortable. There does need to be a level of comfortability with each other, in that you accept this person. There's acceptance there. There's feeling comfortable in each other's presence, feeling comfortable enough to be your authentic self. But to continue dating means to continue appreciating your partner, showing love to your partner, showing respect to your partner, going on date nights, keeping things fresh. And if you're going to do life with somebody, it's a long time to do life with one person. So you have to choose to love them every day in those ways. Make them feel appreciated, because we can take people for granted. And along the way, when we get too comfortable, maybe every Friday night or twice a month you went on date night, and that was something you looked forward to. And then eventually it's, no, I don't want to go, I'm too tired. Or I want to go do this instead. Well, it's like, oh. And eventually you lose that connection. You need to maintain that connection with each other. You need to continue getting to know each other, because you're going to grow as an individual, as am I, and then we're going to grow together. Mm-hmm. So it is imperative that you continue to invest in each other's individual selves, so that you can continue to grow together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, it's a lot of the same. I agree. And I think it's a two-part. Number one, making sure your cup is full too, right?
Yes.
Like as an individual, making sure that you have your things that you're maintaining outside of the relationship, because then in turn, it's only better for the relationship. You need to have some sort of individuality separate to that intimacy that you have with that person too, and that relationship that you have with that person too. So having your time outside of that, just like you need your time outside of work, that you're pursuing some things that you want as an individual, making sure your cup is full and that your heart is full as an individual first, because then you can only contribute to that relationship more. And then the second part is to, especially as a man to a woman, talking from that perspective, is you want to romanticize your woman and ensure that you're putting forth that effort to make them feel beautiful and loved. Like there's this idea, and I think you talked about it too, is to never stop. There's a certain point in a relationship where we stop pursuing our partner, where the hunt ends. This sense of arrival. A lot of ideas around marriage, which we'll talk about later, is once you're married, it ends there. You know what I mean? Like that's where it should begin in another way, right? It's that sort of mentality. So touch on some of those. Hey, I see you want to say something. So.
Because the pursuit, it goes back to the beginning. It goes back to, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to just eagerly want to answer. It's because it causes it causes so much of me, because it comes down to the way men feel loved, how women feel loved. The pursuit, the chase, all that dies, because here's the thing. People aren't going to like this, but let's say the beginning of the relationship, you're chasing, you're pursuing each other, and then as a man, let's say your woman stops appreciating you, stops showing you respect, you stop feeling love as a man, you are going to have no incentive to continue to pursue me, especially if that is consistent behavior. You're going to say, well, what the heck? This doesn't feel good. Of course, in love, you're going to have ups and downs. How long is it lasting for? Fundamentally, you've become completely unappreciative, not showing respect. It's not exactly motivating or enticing to chase, and vice versa. If you as a man stop showing me love, maybe the odd time saying I'm beautiful, or just making me feel love from a female perspective, or you stop keeping your word, let's say, I would be like, oh, maybe I don't want to, I wouldn't feel incentivized to continue pursuing you. So I think it really comes down to remembering and regrounding ourselves and humbling ourselves with the idea that You are a man, I am a woman, and part of the pursuit is to remember how we each feel love. Back to basics. Forget you as Stefano, forget me as Rebecca. Back to basics. How does a man feel loved? How does a woman feel loved? People that are in a relationship right now where maybe they're not feeling that, go tell your man that you appreciate him. Maybe he did something, it wasn't exactly the way you wanted it to be done, but he did it. Go say, thank you so much for doing that. He's going to ask you what else you need done.
Yeah.
And so on.
And even further to that, let's talk about when those things start happening, right? Because you mentioned like, oh, if a man stops paying, compliments and saying some nice things to you, then it's an instant feeling of like wanting to stop pursue them. I don't think it's something as like stop break like that. Like, oh, it's over.
Of course not.
But what can we do when those things start happening? To how do we ensure that they swing back to the way they once were? And how do we kind of fix that?
I think you go back to basics, the foundation. What is the formula? How do we each feel love from a masculine and feminine perspective, and then from the individual perspective? You as my partner, I know you, Stefano. I know what makes you feel loved beyond just being a man. I know what you need. I know what you need in those moments. So if I'm feeling, a kind of way, or if anybody is feeling a certain way, go back to your basics and be like, okay, and then try again. Humble yourself a little bit and go back to basics, because you can always apply those things. It always comes down to that basic foundation. That's my opinion. I do think a lot of people would agree, and there are a lot of people that probably wouldn't agree, obviously. But that's what I think. I think it's going back to basics.
It is. And I always think about, like our parents' generations or the generations before us and the mentality that they had. And that's kind of what I want to talk about now, is the mentality of the relationship, the energy that you put into that relationship, the aura, the way you talk about your partner when they're not there, stuff like that. It sort of leads, and it's a predictor for success or failure of your relationship. Our generations before us had this mentality of marathon type of mentality. It's a marathon mind state in regards to the relationship. We just got to get to the end of the line. We're doing it for the kids. There's not a real level of intimacy or stimulation throughout the experience. So I think that's a big part of it. I have a lot of respect for the past generations, because their sacrifices and elements were a little bit different. But I think what we can learn from that is to maybe change that now. It's not a marathon in a way, like, of course we're trying to get to the end of the line of life and everything, but it's not just, oh, I just need to just stick it out kind of mentality. It's this certain energy that we have that, like I was saying earlier, once you get married, it's all done. We joke about these things, but I think our culture actually believes that. And I think a lot of people of our generation, they really believe that, because they sort of get comfortable when they get married. And that's what I'm going to talk about next with you, is how to avoid comfortability. But touch on that dynamic of how people put that energy, that negative energy, into the relationship. And even if it's in a jokingly way, there's this idea of like, once you get married, it's over, or like, one person for the rest of your life sort of mentality, and taking the experiences of our past generations onto us, just no level of love and intimacy in the relationship, just getting through. What are your thoughts on that?
Anyone going through that, my heart goes out to them. I have a lot of compassion, because that's not, in no way is that fulfilling. I think that people are really missing out on opportunities to love and be loved. And that's where the maintenance is important. When your life changes, kids start coming into the picture, your life gets even busier. It is in those moments and those times when you have to, more than ever, make time for each other. You might have to schedule an hour each week so that you could just spend time together. Whatever that looks like for you, it is so imperative to maintain that connection with each other, or else that's exactly what's going to happen. Enough time goes by, you're not really motivated. It is repairable. But if you start maintaining now, you won't get into that situation where it's much harder to come out of it. So the hard work really starts once you're married. Most people are like, oh, secured them. Now I'm set for life. But you secured each other based on the pursuit of each other, based on how you each were showing up to each other. Now we're married, but now you're not going to show up like that anymore as a person. So what does that mean? So I think that's the misconception. So for me, I get so excited at the thought of that, because I love growth. I love learning. I think there's so much value in continuing to pursue each other and continuing to date each other and You know, you want, as a couple with the divorce rates being so high, you want to beat the odds. But if you want to beat the odds, you have to ask yourself, is the price worth it? It is worth it because you get to have a long-term fulfilling relationship. That's what you want, but it requires a lot of work, a lot of communication, a lot of, emotional intimacy, everything. Like it requires more intentional work that I think a lot of people are unwilling to do because it gets too hard.
Yeah, and there's this sense of arrival, right? You've arrived. Oh, I'm married. I've locked in a long-term relationship. I've arrived.
You haven't. You've just arrived. You've just begun. The
And that's
journey's not
the
over.
intention, the shift of the mindset, right? Because I through conversations and through life, I feel that that's the idea, the arrival. I've arrived. It's over now. I can pack it away, and that's what we're going to get into next. Comfortability. How to avoid comfortability, on an individual level and then on a collective level too. To that point is we get married or we get into a long-term relationship and there's a sense of arrival. I've arrived now. It's good to go. We can pack it in now for the rest of our life. And one of the things that I see is guys get into a long-term relationship, they get married, and they put on a tremendous amount of weight. That's one example. So what is that showing? That is showing that on an individual aspect, you've now arrived mentally and you're good to go. You stop doing the things that you maybe love. You stopped pursuing your own goals, whether it's fitness goals or personal goals. You have to be very cautious of that. You have to be careful of that because that translates into the relationship. And maybe if your partner's not doing the same, they're on the opposite side, they may lose love for you. They may lose respect for you because that man that they once loved, that was on the hunt, that was an absolute stud and was showing up to the gym, doing the things that he needs to do, he's no longer there anymore. So let's touch on comfortability and how to avoid comfortability, especially in an intimate relationship.
Well, on that note, people respect people who respect themselves. People love people who love themselves. So self-respect, again, it starts with the individual. Now, there are circumstances, for instance, sickness. Maybe that could, cause somebody not to go to the gym anymore and there's weight gain, etc. Those are extreme circumstances. But for what you were saying, it comes down to, your values as an individual. And if you feel like it's okay for you to just get comfortable because your partner should just accept you anyways, I don't necessarily agree with that. So that's just kind of to touch on that.
How do we avoid comfortability? How do we avoid it? I think you would agree, basically, it starts as individuals. You have to, I always say that. I say it all the time, but it really does. It starts with you. So if you're getting comfortable, that will translate into your relationship, and the relationship will get comfortable. Now, there's a lot of different contributing factors to that, but what are some conscious things that we can do to ensure that we're avoiding comfortability?
I think reminding yourself of what you value in a relationship and constantly reminding yourself what you want out of that relationship. So I think that that's important. Like, for instance, if you want to have this incredible relationship that's full of love and you're loving each other and you're appreciating each other, then what can you, as the other person in that relationship, do to show up as that? You better be showing up the way that you want to receive that. So long as you're showing up in that way, you're doing your part. I think that's a key element, and constantly reminding yourself of that. For instance, you might have a really long day at work, right? Your partner comes home, oh, I had a long day. Oh, well, you should have seen my day. Or you stop diving a little bit deeper. Those are the moments when you have to be so conscious. It's that connection. So it's you showing up the way you want. I think that's just a very high level starting point.
For sure. Now let's flip the coin around. How do we keep the other person, this is the sense of accountability. How do we keep the other person, or how do we ensure that the other person doesn't get comfortable? We've been through this experience where I feel maybe you're in a repetitive cycle, or you feel I'm doing something specific that's actually counterproductive to me and how I'm orienting myself in this world. You may call me out on that. I may call you out on things. So let's talk about the level of accountability that you can have for the other person to ensure they're avoiding comfortability, but also maintaining their own individuality. And how do we go about that, and how should people go about that?
I have a couple thoughts for that. I think that intent goes a long way. I think so long as something is said and the intent is coming from a place of love, I think you communicate and you get a sense of what that is. I think that we can personalize, certain things, but
I think it's like we've had conversations.
Yeah, so you communicate and you have the conversations to unpack that. Like, maybe you're being like, hey, you know what? I've noticed that there's been a change in this. Like, I feel like, and this is something I continue to learn as well, but instead of like, there's a way to say something, right? And maybe
Yes.
instead of scolding your partner saying,
Yeah.
oh, you don't do this anymore, say, hey, like check in with them, do an inventory check. Is everything okay? I've noticed like, changes in certain habits and stuff. Like, how are you doing? Because maybe it's not that that person is intentionally not wanting to show up that way. Maybe they've got something going on, and then you can create less defensiveness. You can have more of a conversation and that connection. The approach, I think, really matters, and that's something that you can learn as a couple as you continue to grow together and learn each other in a relationship.
And from our experience too, like I was saying to you yesterday, if there's a certain time where maybe you're going through a lot in your head, like you're thinking about something that you've been grappling with for a couple of days, and it may affect how you emulate in this world, how you show up in this world, like your energy and your demeanor and stuff. Communicating that to me helps me feel relieved. And then I can try to support you and show up for you. Like, okay, how can I help you as you grapple through these thoughts or this challenge that you have in front of you? And B, I know right away that has nothing to do with us. Because, especially from a man, instantly we're fixers. We want to go, okay, whoa, there's a problem. I got to fix this. What's going on? Like, is everything okay? Like, what, is there something, did something happen that I missed? Like, what's going on here? Let me put it back together. So by you communicating as the woman saying, hey, listen, I'm not 100% right now. I'm grappling with these thoughts and I have this challenge in front of me that's like drawing a lot of negative emotion. So forgive me if I'm a little bit like back and forth, but this is what I'm kind of experiencing right now. Then the other person can go, okay, beauty, no problem. So then now I can remove any sort of presuppositions and thoughts that I maybe am suspecting has to actually do with us. Because I feel, I don't know, maybe it's just my perspective, but especially from a man, we're going to look at it always like, how is this in relation to me and how can I fix it?
Yeah, because you're a man and men are fixers. So it comes back down to the foundation, the basics, right? Masculinity, and everything you just said there was absolutely correct. And it's like everything comes back down to you, and it comes down to the foundation of how we both operate, right? I think for long-term maintenance in any relationship, the beginning, long-term, sustaining friendships, everything, it's unwavering compassion, giving each other grace, allowing each other to be human beings. Accountability is love. Discipline is love. Loyalty is love. Being kind when you're not feeling so kind is love. Checking yourself is love. And then also looking at yourself and receiving what your partner is saying. Like if I'm going through something and you've pointed that out to me, it's up to me to really tune in and be like, okay, the intention is love. Now what can I do? Because obviously from the self perspective, this is not serving me. This is not good. And now it is intervening and affecting my relationship. But you as my partner come to me with love and are showing me grace. But now it's up to me to take accountability and responsibility for my actions.
We could be just seeking clarity too, right? That's what I'm trying to do. Like, hey, what's going on? Like I notice this different energy, especially when you start to really get to know your partner over time. You notice their energy, things that they do is a little bit different. And sometimes when you ask them for that, ask them what's going on, it's, you're calling them out, but that's a negative way to think about it. But they're just seeking clarity and just trying to understand what's going on here. That's the one problem I feel I have is that if I'm in like a good mood or like I'm having a good day and then maybe you're experiencing some challenges and you're thinking about things and there's some things that you have to like sort of work through that can draw negative emotion, I have a hard time. Like I want to support you and help you, but then I'm just like, whoa, what happened? And I automatically start thinking that it's to do with something that we've been through or something. But so that's you learn about yourself when you're by yourself. And then when you learn about yourself more when you're in a relationship, like I always say. And that's one of the things I've learned from me and you.
And there's more to consider when you're in a relationship. It's not just about you anymore, your feelings. Like, let's say I had a really bad day and you had the best day ever and you can't wait to come home and tell me something.
That's what's hard about a relationship,
and then
though.
What if I like had the worst day ever, It's like, it can be so hard when you're in those lows, let's say, or that this is just one example, right? But you have to let that person share the excitement and just try to show up for each other. Even if it's not like, if I can't jump up and down and cheer with you, I can at least try and you can say, okay, wait, what's going on? But you can appreciate the fact that I still acknowledged that excitement. That is what it means to do your best to be strong mentally as well so that you could show up for you and for your partner. That's why it's so hard because you're not just thinking about you.
I know. It's so complex and it's beautiful in some ways, it's challenging in others, but that's the relationship in a nutshell. It's really work. And some days you might be on 100%, the other person might be on 30%. So it's really finding that balance. But a relationship is an experience. It's an overall experience. And that's what I want to get into is the fourth component. I want to talk about transcending your relationship through experience and then also through maybe a spiritual experience and your relationship with God or whatever that looks like for you. So I want to start off with somewhat of a story. When we went to Punta Cana, it was just a simple we traveled together for the first time. It was a simple trip, all inclusive, nothing crazy. It wasn't no Europe, finding yourself on a wine tour or anything like that. It wasn't anything too complex. It was just a simple trip. But the Liberals had us locked out for 2 years. So it was my first time going away and leaving the country. And it was with you. Now that experience in itself, yes, it may just have been an all-inclusive trip, but it was our first time traveling together, doing new things, getting on a plane, sitting together on a plane, snapping quick selfies on a plane, freaking getting to the resort, enjoying the time in the resort, staying with that person overnight for multiple days, seeing how you guys operate together, having difficult conversations, talking about values, talking about things, doing wild things together, like having a date on the beach and then freaking getting rained on. You remember that? Freaking walking in the sand in the middle of the night and having to wash my feet in the pool because I hate sand on my feet. Like stuff like that we just did together that added value to our relationship. So what I'm saying is experience, even simple experiences like that can really transcend your relationship. And I think that was something important for us, especially at that time. It was really like the next step. So touch on maybe a little bit about that and your perspective of it, and then in further why experience can transcend relationships.
Well, I would agree with you that trip was definitely transcending for us. It was a big marker in our relationship, and I think it definitely allowed us to bond more and connect on a deeper level for sure. I mean, at that point, like I already knew I loved you, so like that was also it was so transcending for me because it was so scary because we had not said it to each other. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I love this man. And so I knew everything changed, right? And once you love somebody, everything changes. So that's just on the comment of the transcending moment for me and you. But in terms of transcending your relationship in general, before we get to spirituality.
Just in general through experience and like how important that is. And it doesn't necessarily need to be just vacations. Like you can touch on other things that you think people do together that helps transcend them through an experience together.
Through experience specifically? I think any experience, like go experience life, like go have a relationship outside of your couch. Like think about, it's going to sound terrible, but all the COVID relationships where you weren't really going out and everybody was just building a relationship from the comfort of the four walls that they lived in. Go out together, go to a restaurant together, go for walks together, go see how your person is with other people, how they react around other people. Like go live together. But I think beyond the experiences is like just so quick as to, as much as you can, just let go of expectations. Like live and let live. Like that is very much, that's what me. It's very much my philosophy. And
they call it a mantra.
It's my mantra, exactly. And what works for your dynamic is not the same for somebody else's, because what we value as individuals and as a relationship, a different couple will value something completely different. So it's like the upward, downward comparison, ridding ourselves of the comparison, ridding ourselves of expectations, and allowing us as a relationship to just be what it is for what works for us. And I think that mentality alone will be transcending in anything you do and elevate those experiences.
I agree. I think it's well said. And to our experience, this is an experience. It's one of the reasons why I love doing these podcasts with you, because I think that we learn more about each other, and we're doing an experience together. Like you said at the beginning of this conversation, it drawed some nerves for you. I'm sure you're much calmer now, because through that experience, we put ourselves in uncomfortable situations that now we've had this experience with each other, and then other people can listen and maybe they take value from it. And remember, we're here humbly learning as much as we can about relationships and how to improve in ours and just taking in everything around us. So it's been amazing to to do these experiences with us. So this is one example of an experience too. Like an experience is not just traveling. It could be like you're doing something new together, like a course or fucking class. I don't know, yoga or some shit. It could be anything. And like you said, removing yourself from the repetitive cycle of that environment that you're used to, moving to other environments and trying new things and really trying to stimulate it. And then especially a step further, which we'll be getting into, God willing, very soon is a family, right? Once you have a family, it's going to require much more effort and planning to ensure that we're putting that time aside for us. So then we can have experiences outside of our family experience too, because all this it all works together. It's all a lot of moving parts. So experience is important, and it plays into who you are, and it plays into your relationship as well. So I love it. I think it's very important, but even a step further. Now, do you have anything else on experience before I go to spirituality and a relationship with God? Is there any other things that kind of pop out to you?
I think kind of leading into marriage before the spirituality, I think that, I guess like for me even, but even a mantra is like, I think people have to assess how they grew up and look at their examples of love and ask yourself how you want to show up for your family, for your partner, and for your children. So I think that you asked, how do we avoid comfortability, for instance? Even something like that. Like, what is it that you want so deeply in your relationship for you as a couple and for you as a family? Show up as that. Give yourself grace when mistakes happen. Give yourself grace when maybe expectations are not met. But how do you want to show up for your family? For me, I want my kids to know nothing but, so much unwavering love. And I want them to look at our relationship and be like, my mom and dad are so in love. That's what I want. Now, are they never going to see us argue? No. But fundamentally, you want their core memory of our relationship to be fruitful and loving. So that is the goal. That's what I have in my mind every day. And that's what motivates me to continue showing up in the best way that I can. So find what motivates you, because as you transcend into marriage and all these next levels in your dynamic, that is what's going to keep you grounded.
And speaking of marriage in particular, we'll talk a little bit about that now. But firstly, about marriage is the relationship with God. And it was very important for us to get married in a church, for example. But through that experience, it's required us to show up to church a little bit more. And then even previous to that, I was going through my own personal experience of elevation with my relationship with God. Do you think it's important for a couple to have spiritual conversations, to understand where they're at with what they believe in, whether it's God, the universe, the fucking stars and sun, running in the fields with no socks on, whatever it is that they believe in that means the most to them, that transcends them on a spiritual level? Do you think that's an important conversation that you should have?
Absolutely, because it's part of your values and it's part of it's part of your core. So I think that if, for instance, if you were somebody who was very religious and you're with an atheist, for instance, doesn't matter how much you have in common. That's an extreme, but that's just to provide some perspective. Your relationship is not going to work. Why? Because you might be able to avoid certain things, but what if you, as the religious one, wants to baptize your kids? Well, the one who's not religious will say, absolutely not. So you as a couple have to decide if that dynamic works and if you can forego and negotiate those things. So I think that having some kind of a connection in that sense is important. I think that knowing where each other is at and accepting each other with where they're at is important. I think it's complex, but having a general sense is imperative to your relationship, because there are going to be instances in your life that come up that might require that part of your life to be put into practice, so to speak, and the other person might not align. So it's important to have those conversations up front so you feel like you're honored, respected, and valued for what your belief system is.
Yeah, it comes down to values, doesn't it, right? Like that's a big value. Like there's certain values, like, oh, I value going for walks. Like, it's big value too, but it's what I like doing. But then there's values like, do you believe in God or not? Like that's a perfect example. Like somebody who believes in God cannot date an atheist. That is like a major opposite in their value system. And that's why I always made jokes about how I never wanted to date a liberal. And if you were a liberal, I wouldn't be with you, because there's so many complex things that come with that, with a reflection of your personality, right? Because that comes down to values. I say it jokingly, but what I'm really getting at is the value structure, because you can see already, oh, if this person is like this, that means that they have these sort of values most likely. So it comes down to values in that way. And I think our relationship with God, and maybe we'll kind of tie a knot on it here, our relationship with God, I think, has increased since we first started dating, mainly because we've leaned into these religious experiences. And it doesn't need to necessarily be specific to religion, but faith experiences like getting married has required us to open our hearts more to God and that experience. Would you agree?
I do. And I also think that things don't need to be like tit for tat, like in terms of where we are on that spectrum. You know what I mean? Like, I think that we definitely have leaned into it more. And I think that just on, the sacrament of marriage specifically, I think that there's something so beautiful about what that actually is and what that means. It's two people coming together as one. Like, that's what that is. And if you look at the biblical references, even in regards to that, and just everything that marriage means, it's so profound to me, right? Sharing your life with somebody and having that union and being given the opportunity and the honor to be that with somebody is transcending in itself. It's an experience that is incredible. And I think that those folks that really value that sacrament and look at it from that perspective and beyond, maybe they are more spiritual or more religious. Not everybody would feel that way because some people don't value marriage. People who value marriage in the way I described might value it for those reasons, while others might value it for something different. So what you are connected to, the divine being, whatever that looks like for you, will determine the value you have attached to that, for instance. So that's just my opinion on that in regards to leaning more into it because of marriage.
You mentioned scripture there, and there's one thing I'm thinking about right now, and I'm going to pull it up, and it's probably the best way for us to end. I sent it to you. I believe it's Proverbs 31 about a woman. This is a reference from scripture. It's pretty long, but let's see if I can jog through it. It's basically what Proverbs 31 is scripture talking about the definition or the assessment of a noble wife and her character. A wife of noble character who can find she is worth far more than rubies. Her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value. She brings him good, not harm, all the days of her life. She selects wool and flax and works with eager hands. She is like the merchant ships, bringing her food from afar. She gets up while it is still night. She provides food for her family and portions for her female servants. I don't really know what that distinction is or what that understanding is, but she considers a field and buys it out of her earnings, and she plants a vineyard. She sets about her work vigorously. Her arms are strong for the tasks. She sees that her trading is profitable and her lamb does not go out at night. In her hand, she holds the distaff and grasps the spindle with her fingers. She opens her arms to the poor and extends her hands to the needy. When it snows, she has no fear for her household, for all of them are clothed in scarlet. She makes coverings for her bed. She is clothed fine linen and purple. Her husband is respected at the city gate, where he takes his seat among the elders of the land. She makes the linen garments and sells them and supplies the merchants with sashes. She is clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. She speaks with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue. She watches over the affairs of her household and does not eat at the bread of idleness. Her children arise and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her. Many women do noble things, but you suppress them all. Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord to be praised. Honor her for all that her hands have done, and let her works bring her praise at the city gate. So that's Proverbs 31. That is the explanation of a noble woman in character, and I think you represent a lot of those qualities. So
Wow, thank you.
very grateful for you. And this conversation, that's the best way to sort of tie it on it. Before I do, we are heading towards getting married. So I want to ask you, what are some of your excitements, fears, and experiences of getting married so far?
Ooh, I just can't wait to marry you. I'm just excited to transcend with you and marry you. I think that that's the most exciting thing for me, is to be able to call you my husband. And as I tell you all the time, there's no greater honor than a man asking you to be his wife. I really do don't take that for granted. So thank you for choosing me. And I'm grateful and I'm excited for that. I think fears, oh gosh, I don't really know what kind of fears to state. I think I have more excitement with with navigating like some of the things we talked about today, like comfortability. It's like, bring it on. I'm gonna be the best I can be. Like where I could be afraid of maybe like falling short, it equally excites me to show up. If that makes sense. What about you?
I agree. I'm excited to call you my wife, obviously. Rebecca Pecchia, soon to be, so get used to it. It's an exciting process, but we decided to do it within a year because of many contributing factors, but because like, I don't believe in the whole waiting. I ain't gonna have a 6-year engagement or whatever. Hey, everybody, different strokes for different folks, but I want to have a family with you. And so I believe that I'd like to be married before that. So it's a beautiful thing. I'm very excited. The process putting it together, especially within a year, has definitely led us to different experiences that have required us to work together and really sort through things. So to anybody who's considering getting married, if it's of your value, I definitely encourage it. If you do not value it and you're doing it for somebody else, just like anything in this life, you shouldn't be doing something that you don't want to do if it's not in alignment with you. Like I have a certain religious relationship with the whole experience. More faith-driven. I don't like to say religious all the time, but like faith-driven experience to why I want to get married in a church and then married to you before we have kids, stuff like that. It's a beautiful thing. I'm very traditional in that sense. So the only fears that I have is just you're striving for perfection. Am I going to fall short? How are we going to evolve? But fears are good. Just like at the beginning of this conversation, we were a little there's nerves that are part of it, but look how beautiful it ended up, and that's the same way I think it's going to be for our relationship. So looking forward to it. Now, lastly here, the final segment on Couple Casuals podcast is called Salute. I give an opportunity to the guests, Rebecca Nobrega for the 4th time, soon to be Rebecca Pecchia, an opportunity to end us off with cheers, words of encouragement, or a big proper salute. So I leave it to you. Go.
Thank you. I think for anybody who stuck around for this whole conversation, I think it's like you said midway, this is a humble approach to maintaining relationships, and we are all learning. I think the most important thing is, as even you mentioned, alignment. Do what serves you. Do what works for you as a couple. There is no one size fits all. And take what resonates and let go what does not. Because you are an individual. You as a couple get to work together. Do what is right for you. That is it. Live and let live. Let people be who they are. Let other relationships be as they are. Focus on you and everything else will flourish.
Love it. Well said. Big salute to you and big salute to
Thanks
everybody.
for having me.
Thanks for coming. Until next time, we'll be doing these a lot. I love these conversations. It's they're very fruitful, enjoyable, and I think there's good value for everybody. And we learn too, right? This is what we're doing. We're learning. So I appreciate you guys. Until next time, I love you, nobody else. Ciao.